Hi, it's Dave here, and you're listening to The Cinemile, where myself and my wife Kathy walk home from the movies. But she is not with me today because she stone cold refused to see The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. So instead, I roped in my friend Joe Kiely. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Dave. Hi, listeners.
My surrogate wife for the day. Joe, I need you to, in detail, tell everybody about your relationship to The Lord of the Rings.
Wow. Okay, where do I start?
Yeah.
Really big book in my childhood. Read it as a teen. Loved the original trilogy, the movies. Actually, the first exposure
I saw them with you, I believe. I'm
probably.
sure. Yeah.
First exposure was when in second class at around 8 years old, my second class teacher read The Hobbit out to us.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, since then it's just been all Tolkien all the time.
Did she break it into like a trilogy over 3 years?
Not quite.
Stretch it out as long as she could.
Well, you know, I heard a little bit of that story, and then you know what I said? I said, now we're talking.
No. Oh, very good. I'll allow it. So, who knows what this movie is about if you're listening? You might not, because it seems to be, I would say, relatively under the radar. This is an animated Lord of the Rings movie, the first time they've ever created an animated movie. It's back in cinemas. It's not on Prime or any of that stuff. We'll get into that in a second. And it's made by a Japanese anime director, and it's done in the sort of Japanimation style. Which I think is pretty cool and interesting.
It's certainly a choice.
Yeah.
Which, like, we've had the amazing Peter Jackson trilogy, which is pretty much unbeatable, untouchable.
For sure.
And when he went back and tried to make The Hobbit, you know, obviously they tried their best. It has some moments. It's a lot of crap. I think that they caught lightning in a bottle with the first trilogy, and any subsequent attempt has been in vain.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see a different aspect than the usual ring story. I will be disappointed if there's even allusions to rings. I want to see more stuff.
No rings.
No rings.
Ringless, please.
Ringless.
I
want horse lords, all the time.
We're getting so much horses in this one, Joe. So you told me when we met up just for this that you don't have too much detail on this, right? So what do you know?
I haven't watched the trailer.
Yeah.
I know that Brian Cox is in it.
Uh-huh.
I know it features some of the hobbits, but not the hobbits. And
is Brian Cox taking the hobbits to Isengard?
I know that Brian Cox, in preparation for this role, did not read any Tolkien books, which is...
Of course he didn't.
That would be not very Brian Cox of him. So look, I'm just looking forward to spending a bit of time in Middle Earth, learning a little bit about what appears to be the Third Age, a few hundred years before the events of the War of the Ring.
180 something years, as I have learned.
Oh, I see.
From my brief bit of research on this. So here's a few other interesting tidbits. So I was quite interested in the rights around this movie and who's making it, and because for anyone who surely is aware from the massive marketing, the Rings of Power TV show was a part of Amazon's acquisition of the rights of Lord of the Rings, but TV only. So they do not own any theatrical rights to anything Lord of the Rings, which remains with New Line Cinema and Warner Brothers, who own New Line. And this movie seems to be a product of retaining those rights.
Okay, but
so
it's
that
also
is a modus operandi for this movie.
Oh, so it's not just a product of it, but this is the means by which they retain those rights.
Exactly right. Okay. So if they release this movie, they get to retain the rights for another, I don't know, I think 25 years was the original deal. I don't know.
Okay, so only noble intent. That's what we
exactly.
what we can presume here.
So hopefully, fingers crossed, it turns out to be a brilliant, fantastic creative endeavor, but it is certainly a hollow money grabbing endeavor with which to begin with.
Yeah, and I don't have high hopes for this. I have no expectations. I'm hoping for lots of horse lore. I'm looking for some of the themes that Lord of the Rings and the Tolkien legendarium explores. So like
good versus evil, and
the frailty of men, and the kind of the nobility and hope involved in that, and a bit of good old escapism, which is really what this offers. So.
I'm down with that. So let's head in and we'll see you all shortly.
All Middle-earth knows the tale of the War of the Ring. But 200 years before that...
Riders of the Mark! Brothers of Rohan!
There was an older tale.
Arise! We come with an offer to strengthen Rohan.
Hera, daughter of Helm, I, Wolf, seek your hand in marriage.
Our fathers speak as if I were not even in the room.
I do not want to marry you.
You do not seek an alliance. You seek a throne. You will live to regret this.
Okay, hi, we're back. We have not seen The Lord of the Rings, The War of Rohirrim, and mere minutes have passed since you last heard from us. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. We got up to that desk at our local cinema, and they told us, oh, that screening of The War of the Rohirrim, it's no longer happening because nobody is going to see this film, and we've cancelled it.
Yeah, you heard it here first. Tolkien has been cancelled.
Unbelievable.
For reasons we have yet to determine.
I mean, I suspected this film would bomb and nobody's going to go see it.
It's incredibly niche.
Yeah.
Like, if you take the Venn diagram of Lord of the Rings and anime, like... Oh, and it's a Monday night.
Yeah.
Like,
so I'm not surprised. But what I am surprised by is, and I didn't know this, and keen to hear from any of our listeners who work at or have worked at cinemas. I just assumed the movie plays to nobody if nobody shows up, right?
Well, so
but I guess not.
This is the weird part because they made this decision at 2:00 today,
yes,
and changed the listing to a more profitable film.
So it is, just to let everyone know, it's 8:15 now. So six hours ago, yes.
Yeah, 6 hours ago, after we made all of our plans and arranged everything to come to the cinema, they switched it up on us. And now we have to find a different cinema, which is a substantial drive away.
We're on a quest.
This is exactly what we came for, an adventure, and we are on one.
We're taking the podcast to Isengard. We're going. We are. Here's the thing. We've got a 25-minute drive and it's starting in 15 minutes. So if traffic's in our favour and there's a suitable amount of ads and trailers,
you see,
we're going to make this.
If it's performing as badly as we think it is, then no one's going to put trailers
no ads,
in front
no trailers, straight into the movie. Okay, so we will come back with an update. Hopefully we will be able to see this movie.
We will see enough of this movie to update you.
That's true. So when next time you hear from us, we will hopefully have seen this movie, or they're cancelling all over the shop.
So before we got into the first cinema, I was kind of commenting that I was getting the full cinema experience of like being, right down to the wire, nearly late for the movie.
Yeah.
But apparently I hadn't gotten the full cinema experience of having to drive tens of kilometers to try and find the movie.
Well, this is a new cinema experience. We're breaking new ground here, Joe. This is the Cinemile War of the Rohirrim experience.
This is the Cinemilage.
One time only. Cinemilage, very good. Okay, so we will be back very soon with an update. Watch this space.
The boy I knew would never wish for war.
The boy you knew is gone.
Fire!
There's so many of them. I pledged to fight for my king.
You know nothing of war.
I'm the fastest rider you have.
People need hope, Hera. Something to believe in.
My pride. My joy. You could rule the world.
Hello, we're back. Good news. We found the final remaining showing of the War of the Rohirrim in Ireland.
It is uncancelable. We will find it.
We visited 14 cinemas. This was cancelled like a plague.
We traversed Erda. Isn't Erda the name of the...
I have no idea.
Middle Earth anyway.
somewhere in Middle Earth. So, as always on the Cinemile, there will be no spoilers until we drive onto Spoiler Street, because our plan was to walk back to my house, but now we're driving.
We're a little caught for time, so we're making up for time that we had to search for cinemas.
A little bit. But on the upside, before we get to our review of The Lord of the Rings, The War of Rohirrim, me and Joe just decided to talk about the Rings of Power Season 2 for a bit. On the way to it, because we had a bit of extra time. So if you want to listen to that, head over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/The Cinemile for a very brief chat about the Rings of Power Season 2. So Joe, what are your thoughts on The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim?
Yeah, mixed. I mean, I probably wouldn't have chosen to go to the cinema to see this had this not been your suggestion.
Had I not coerced you into...
gently nudged, I suppose I would say. I was intrigued going in, and I am considerably less intrigued now. I think I know.
You can't have intrigue after you've seen the film.
I think I know.
You know what happens.
All I need to know about the Rohirrim.
Fair enough.
At least that period. Yeah, kind of mixed feelings, if I'm honest. There are points that it nailed really well. It certainly felt like Lord of the Rings in quite a few places.
Yeah.
One place in particular, two places maybe. I think this could easily have just languished on a streaming service somewhere, and I would never have come across it. I don't think it's really event cinema. But that said, you know, if you're into your Lord of the Rings and you want something a little bit different, then, you know, and you have 2.25 hours to kill. Well, we were discussing going in, this is probably a 2p movie. to get
it's long. It felt long. It felt like a 3-hour movie.
So I find this with anime in general. I have a long, rich tradition of falling asleep through just about every Ghibli film I've ever seen.
Ghibli's very soothing, though.
It is, but no, yeah. I fell asleep at Akira. I fell asleep at Ghost in the Shell.
Oh, good on you.
Anime and me. I really should remember this anytime I'm having trouble sleeping.
Anime and me, sleepy time.
Sleepy time, exactly. So there was a portion, I'm not going to lie, in the first 2/3, maybe the middle third of the film, where I was kind of nodding off a little bit.
I felt a bit sleepy as well.
Okay, not just me.
No, it wasn't just you, but it is late. But yeah, I'm on the same page as you. I have mixed feelings. I started off really Luke cold towards this movie. It took a while to grab me, but it did. And in many parts, I thought I did get swept up in it. And on the whole, I think I like it. I think it's good. I think it's a success. But there are some issues with it. It doesn't. I think you've hit the nail on the head. This doesn't feel like event viewing. It doesn't feel like essential viewing. This feels like a nice to have. It feels like the Animatrix in that there's some great stuff in it, but it's like bonus material.
What I would say, like, having been through a lot of the Lord of the Rings books lately, there's a lot of stuff that's just kind of appendix.
Yeah.
And so, at least in that respect, this fits the Tolkien world, where there's just some stuff going on. You can take or leave it. It's not part of the main thread.
Yeah.
You know, you're not missing much.
But we will get to spoilers about how they try to connect some main thread dots very clumsily. A few things I'd like to call out. One, despite the fact we've both acknowledged this isn't essential viewing and surely would feel more at home on a Netflix that feels like where you'd expect to see this. But naturally, Amazon have the TV rights to Lord of the Rings, so that can't happen. So it has to be in cinemas where no one's going. So it's a bit of a catch-22. But I will say, that said, I did enjoy. I felt the battle scenes landed really well for me in the cinema because the sound design was particularly good and crunchy. I don't know, did you notice that?
I thought that the sound overall was very impressive. I thought that the music, they had brought back some of the themes from the original trilogy and they'd expanded and extended them. That really, you know, if you have those kind of sense memories of those movies, it pulls you back in immediately into that world. There are other things that will pull you out of that world immediately as well. So, kind of,
you were in and out.
In and out of consciousness.
Let's talk about the let's talk about the animation style, because I think you and me both I was thinking it, and then you turned to me and said, "Is the animation a bit cheap?" And I can't decide whether, and neither of us are anime experts, so would love to hear from anyone who's more of a subject matter expert. But I wasn't sure at many points. Are they just evoking an older style of hand-drawn animation here, and the frame rate's deliberately a little sort of choppy? Or have they just cut corners on the budget so they can renew the theatrical rights to The Lord of the Rings?
It's possibly both, because it takes a long time to do that sort of animation right.
Yeah.
Like there's actually, and this is not a spoiler, there's a shot of a kind of a sweeping shot at the beginning, like the map turns into the landscape, and there's a bit of movement in the foreground, and I was like, oh God, I'm in trouble here, because this is quite low frame rate, sort of not as smooth and as slick as we're used to. Like you compare it with, I don't know, Spirited Away, or you compare it with something like Howl's Moving Castle, or Princess Mononoke is probably a big influence on this in particular. It has a lot of Mononoke vibes, but I think Studio Ghibli is a world apart from what we just witnessed, and I think part of that is cost.
And another thing I'm feeling coming off the back of I just watched Arcane season 2 on Netflix, which is honestly legitimately pushing animation into I think into new territory, and is like incredible. And what I was feeling was that show, which also isn't perfect, but it captures it somehow expresses the human face in the characters, and little nuances that are just like at the animators and the voice actors projecting an entire performance. And what I felt was, in this movie, I felt a real come down from that, because the faces are not expressive. So
yes,
a lot of the work gets put on the voice actors there.
Yeah, and you know, all credit to the talent that's on the show here, and working really hard to convey the emotion and to get the plot moving and all that kind of jazz. But you're right, the old style of kind of Japanese animation with limited movement on in the face. It's just the eyes and the mouth that really kind of have to do all of the heavy lifting.
It's a style, and yes, I'm not to diminish the work of any animator, but that's just that's how I felt. I felt like I wasn't getting. And another thing I'll say, just on the character and the stories, they are like, actually we'll talk about it more in spoiler straight. But I was largely invested, I would say, despite the fact there is very little sort of character progression or anything to cling to. But then I reminded myself that actually the Lord of the Rings world deals in archetypes, and that's fine. And actually, and if you think of it just as a big sweeping heroic sort of epic with nobility and scoundrels, and I think it does all of that perfectly well.
It does. It's the Lord of the Rings, but despite its scope and despite its scale and themes, it is largely uncomplicated. Like it's not. There's not a huge range of nuance or motive. What I would say by design. But what I would say is, I suppose it's notable even in animation, where you can do whatever you want. You can portray anything. Absolutely anything can be put there up on the screen. But it somehow is less diverse than the original trilogy, which is saying something. There is, to my knowledge, there wasn't one character that wasn't from, apart from the orcs, there was probably not one character that was from
from Rohan.
Not from Rohan, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's true. To be fair, it is the war of the Rohirrim.
It is the war of the Rohirrim, but it is like, I think Lord of the Rings has maybe evolved over the past 20 years, and this could be a step backwards in terms of imagination. Remember, we're talking about a world where you can imagine, you know, everything and anything is existing within that. I don't think it plays anymore to have like a very monochromatic cast, especially when
that's true.
Like it's just a setting on a tablet that you're really that's really what you're doing here. Like there's almost no excuse for it in animation.
That's a great point. I think let's go to spoiler street. It sounds like both of us I would soft recommend this. I think if you're into Lord of the Rings, you will enjoy this. I think if you could get swept up in this. It's not amazing, but it's quite good. And there were certainly some scenes, which I'll get to in a minute, which I thought landed really well, and some real moments. Like it occasionally really lit up.
At its peak, it was. At its peak, it is Lord of the Rings, and that's high praise. There's probably I'm struggling to think of any moment in the Hobbit movies where it actually achieved that. So in that sense, it's probably ahead of those, which is not saying something.
I can think of only one moment. There's only one moment that sticks with me from The Hobbit, and it's all the dwarves singing in Bilbo's house at the beginning. That always lands really well.
That's fair.
That always lands. I've watched them once. I'm never watching them again. Right, we're going to go to spoiler street now for The Lord of the Rings, The War of Rohirrim, but before we get there, you might hear a quick ad.
Hello, this is Simon Mayo.
And this is Mark Kermode.
He's the UK's best and most trusted film critic.
He's a best-selling writer, broadcaster, and national treasure.
Far too kind. Kermode and Mayo's Take has all the reviews you need and star guests such as
Sir Ian McKellen.
Nice to be with you.
Emma Stone.
That sounds like something I would love to be a part of.
Ewan McGregor.
I'm very good. How are you doing?
Kate Blanchett. What was that word you used?
Cattywampus.
Kermode and Mayo's Take. All the film you need. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, so full spoilers now for the anime of the rings. So, few things that really I thought were really effective and great scenes were what are they called? The elephants, the oliphants? You know, what are those big elephant creatures?
They didn't actually mention them by name in the show. They didn't call them oliphants. They called them something else, which escapes me right now.
It is Oliphant from memory, isn't it?
It is Oliphant. Yeah. It is Timothy Oliphant.
Yeah, there is.
That's what they're called in the books and in the trilogy.
I thought they were incredibly scary and intimidating in this. That first encounter with that one, culminating in that swamp creature. That was all awesome, and I loved how you get to see her cousin in action. You get to see Hela in action. Oh, you need to turn back there.
Okay.
So I thought that was a great scene. I thought all the battle around the village and all the betrayal and all that stuff I thought landed pretty well.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff around Helm's Deep was really good as well. So there is some great stuff in this movie, and also the imagery of Hela riding out onto that bridge wearing a wedding dress, I think is pretty badass.
Yeah.
She's a badass character.
Pledging herself to death as well.
Yes, that was good, wasn't it?
Pretty badass.
Yeah. What moments stood out to you?
The thing that landed for me most was Helm's punch, where he one punched the would-be usurper.
Oh my god!
Death.
At the very beginning, yeah. And that there was a lot of good. That's another thing that I thought they landed well in the sound effects was the crack of
impact.
A punch. Yeah, that you felt that punch.
Yeah, totally.
But his own surprise at how mighty he is was impressive in that moment.
He was like, I barely touched him, and he killed him with a single punch. Well, that's why he's Hammerhand, isn't it? That's the.
And they set him up really well for later. I loved all that stuff where he was like, it was quite surprising when he suddenly became a wraith and was killing them off one by one through his secret tunnel every night. I did not see that coming, and I thought his death on the bridge, like just taking on all these people, was awesome.
It's total hero stuff,
isn't it? It's good. It's classic, but it landed, and just a little goodbye through the slit of the door. We've seen that 100 times, you know, Spock and Kirk and Amelia, who else?
Exactly.
But it lands. Those things land, and they landed really well here.
Heroic sacrifice is always gonna do well in these things.
And this had a lot of heroic sacrifice.
Oh yeah.
The second brother, with his when his horse. This is I think my favorite moment of the movie, actually. The moment where his horse can't keep up, and the poor old horse is just like panting for breath, and they animate the misty breath coming out from this horse, and he comes down tenderly and then knocks his boat. I thought all that was magic.
Yeah, and like even with the limitations of animation, it is some feat to get that emotion across. And it actually says a lot about the audience that we're willing to project that amount into inanimate animation. You know, that it's
in animation.
In animation, a drawing essentially that we're able to imbue with all of this characteristic, and we and the creators can do that. But one of the other things that really stood out was the kind of parallels of Hela and Wolf fighting as kids, and then the same thing playing out during the climax. I thought it really kind of had a strong emotional payoff there. Now, Wolf is sort of this kind of caricature anime bad guy, but at the same time, it's exactly what's called for in this.
Yeah, they give him just a smidgen of like sympathy.
Yeah.
From one, his relationship to our protagonist, the fact that they were children, and then they're sort of seen at the beginning. But that's it.
Oh,
you know, he becomes pure evil as soon as his dad gets one punched.
Yeah, and like he's kind of consumed by that, and we do see that. That's a recurring theme in Lord of the Rings, is that, like, in particular, men and their pride, like, leads them astray, or they get consumed with vengeance, and like they get lost to it, which is essentially that's what happens to the nine rings of the men, is that they get lost in the power of it. But
and we saw that happen to Helm a little bit, right? Where his pride wouldn't allow him to listen to his nephew, who was speaking sense.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's almost a bit of a reverse worm tongue going on as well, because Wolf's advisor seems kind of reasonable, and he seems like a good strategic advisor, and Wolf is just like dismissing him out of hand.
And Helm had a really traitorous advisor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
quite the opposite.
Who betrayed him, yeah.
Who looked, I think, was deliberately, I would imagine, modelled on the Lord of Rohan.
Theoden?
Thank you. In The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
I imagine he's supposed to be a descendant of him.
Could be. Yeah, we could speculate as to the connections. But luckily we don't have to speculate, because at the end of War of the Rohirrim, they join up some dots that really do not need to be joined up.
That was so painful. We spoke in our chat about the Rings of Power about the pain of prequels doing what I describe as the Han Solo naming.
Yeah. On the way to the car, I think we landed on the term fan disservice.
Yeah, that's it. They think they're giving us what we want, and all it's doing is caused me physical pain. So for anyone, let's describe it just for anyone who's listening, who hasn't seen the film for whatever reason and is listening. So at the end of this movie, we get the Saruman bit, which is whatever. I mean, it's just like
you could take or leave that. You don't need Saruman in this whatsoever.
Here he is, but the film pans up as if it's just like, whoa!
It's like, oh, amazing, and everyone's just like, what time is it? I need to pick up the kids or whatever.
This has nothing to do with this story.
But worse, more egregious than that.
Go on, tell him.
Is Hela takes off she gets an unexpected invitation, I believe. I think that's what they say.
Yeah.
And she's
I knew as soon as she said that, I was like, oh no.
So she says she's going to meet a wizard, and we're like, okay, yeah, we all know where this is going. We got it.
Yeah.
And then she says she's asked what the name is. She says he goes by many names, and we're like, okay, we got it.
She said it with a full stop.
Yeah.
No, but then
there's
I thought,
a pause.
There's such a long pause, and I thought, well done, movie. You've restrained yourself.
Until like she almost whips back around and just like shows off the name, and it's like, oh, it's Gandalf, and it's like not quite it's, but you know,
it hurts so bad that it was that pause where I thought we'd gotten away with it.
Yeah. Oh, it's so disappointing.
It's totally Gandalf.
There's no need for that, and we've already had that this year with some other stuff. So it's just. It's a hat on a hat. It really, there's nothing to be gained from it.
Nothing. It's like, and I don't care. Tell your own, and the movie had done a great job at telling its own story. Like it told its own story.
It did, but it
Except for
it told it and it showed it. So like show don't tell, but it showed and told.
Yeah.
Like by the time Helm had his final stand, I was like, okay, I understand why it's called Helm's Deep. And then she goes and explains it
from now on
for no reason.
Who are you talking to? You're just about to kill this guy.
So yeah, some notes. We have some notes.
That all felt like the worst
studio notes.
And maybe this stuff isn't studio notes, but it feels like studio notes. It feels like somebody saying, but they'll be expecting it to tie into Lord of the Rings.
And it did.
Right? Yeah, it's
the whole movie. It's a rehash of the siege
at Helm's Deep again. Yeah,
even down to like the
them trying to escape out the tunnels, them leaving the same town to go to the same fortress.
Yeah, and the rescue down the hill with the horse riders coming down.
It's got it all. But I will say
all the stuff we've already seen.
But none of that actually bothered me, to be honest. Sure. I know we'd seen it all, but and it repeats a lot of the same beats, but I felt that all of that stuff was, well, it looked different because it was animation, but
that's the key difference.
It had it felt fresh enough that or it felt like it was different twists on the same sort of stuff.
We're definitely in remix territory.
Yeah, that's it.
It's like getting a cover version from a different country of a song that you know pretty well.
That's it.
That's what we just witnessed, and for better or worse, it's going to suit some people.
But there's something to that, and I like I like that they got a Japanese director to do a different visual look for this, through a different lens, but the same sort of. But they got the core ingredients right.
They did. I have a suspicion though, with all of the wraith stuff and the kind of ghostly business in the middle. I have a suspicion that this might have been a script that was floating around that got attached to Lord of the Rings.
Oh, maybe.
And that they rewrote it in this world in order to get it made.
Yeah.
Or else the reverse was, we need to make a movie, let's pull an existing script and transplant it in there. So
the wheel was turning anyway. The capitalism wheel turned.
Oh yeah.
And we got some content.
Yeah. Are we content though with our content?
I'm gonna say I'm happy enough. I was up and down throughout the film, but by the end I was on board. And,
me too.
And then they told me his name was Gandalf, and they lost me. But for the most part, I am satisfied. I'm entertained.
I don't want to relitigate the Rogue One controversies of the past, but like Star Trek Rogue One was an amazing film.
Star Wars.
Oh wow! Wow!
You're trying to insult all the fandoms.
Come at me! So Rogue One anyway was an amazing film right up until the very very end of it, and I think like this has a bit of that where they could have avoided some pitfalls and they just walked straight into them.
Jumped right in.
Yeah,
jumped into the pit.
Totally.
Anyway.
Yeah, I'm glad I went. I'm glad I saw it. I'm never watching it again. Like, mark my words, I will never watch this again.
No, but I probably won't either. But there are things that I'll take away from it and remember from it.
Yeah.
So I think to your point, I will remember things. I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong when you're all listening in 10 years, but I don't think... I think I will remember moments from this movie more than the Hobbit movies. Which went right over my head. Or Rings of Power, which was... Yeah, as a counterpoint, I found it very difficult to watch Rings of Power. I found it... that this movie was long, but I was on board with it.
Yeah, I think so. I think the fact that it was reasonably self-contained and wasn't primarily concerned with rings or Sauron. Not one mention. It's great.
Yeah. What's his name? He goes by many names. One of them, Sauron. Anyway, listen, thank you, Joe, for agreeing to come to this movie you didn't want to see. And thank you, all of you, for listening. If you want to chat to me and Kathy, you can do it thecinemile@gmail.com. That's our email. Or you can say hello at thecinemile on Instagram, on Letterboxd, on YouTube, on Blue Sky. Or join our Patreon and come and listen to me and Joe shit on the Rings of Power season 2.
I will pose one final question for your listeners.
Go ahead.
Did Kathy make the right choice in not coming to this movie?
Yeah, Kathy would. I think Kathy would.
Well, for Kathy, there's no question that for Kathy, it's and I 100% agree. But is there anyone who disagrees that she made the right choice?
Oh, I see. Okay, well, yeah, that's a good question. There you go. You got a call to action. Let us know, and if you have a message for Joe, we will naturally pass it on to him. Thanks for listening. Bye.
What does Mordor want with rings?